What is leadership? Can I ask you all please to stand up? Thank you. So at least I've passed the first test. I've got people to do something they didn't want to do and made them feel okay about it. That's leadership. Can you now pair yourself up with a colleague, someone next to you, because you're going to be working in pairs during today. So just eye somebody up. You don't have a long conversation with them. It's not about introducing yourself. But just so you recognize who they are. This is going to be in 3 stages. Firstly, I'm going to tell a very personal story about finding and following your own true north. Then there's going to be a very interactive session in your pairs, and we're going to take you through the Inspiring Leadership Compass and what it might mean for you personally. All the time I want you to make it about you. So I'm telling a story, but I want you to resonate with, what does this mean for me in Emirates Group? What does it mean for me? And then finally we're going to have some time for some Q&A before we wrap up at 4. Now some of you I know very kindly staying on beyond 3:30, which is normally your finishing time. If people want to stay on for further chats beyond 4, and the rest of you want to make a run for the door, Lee and I are happy to chat to those who want to stay, but we'll probably go about 4:30. So while you're standing, let's do a quick straw poll. If you consider that currently you are a leader, or in the past you have been a leader, would you please sit down? Don't worry about those who are standing still. Those who are standing, if you aspire to be a leader, would you please sit down? Luckily, no one's in the wrong session. So let's begin. I'd like you to cast your mind back to your very earliest memories. Your very earliest memories. What were they like? What memory stays in your mind? My memory, captured on this day in a very grainy cine reel in those days, is of a windswept Scottish airfield with the rain glistening off the runway, and my mother in the picture there, and myself, and I'm 3 years and 10 months. Now, any of you who have had small people, or you were small once yourself, you remember it's very important, those 10 months. 3 years and 10 months. And this photograph was on a very auspicious day. Something very special happened on that day to us. But we lived in this location, and everybody was often running for cover. It was very cold, it was very wet, very bleak. Because it was the airfield from which my father flew. He was a pilot in the Fleet Air Arm in the British Royal Navy. And we lived in a little caravan next to the huts you can see behind us. Because that's all we were entitled to at the time. Just a caravan. We weren't entitled to a house. Now the memory I have of under 4 years old was of a knock on our caravan door. And my mother opening the door. There in front of us was this tall Royal Naval officer in full dress uniform, standing still and quiet while the rain hit the tarmac behind him. And he said, "Mrs. Perks, it is with great sadness that I must tell you, as the casualty visiting officer, that your husband," my father, Lieutenant Commander Paul Perks, has been killed while on operations. From that moment, everything, I mean everything, in our lives changed. We were no longer guests of the Royal Navy in that little caravan on that airfield. We no longer had food for basic provisions and clothes. And we no longer had Paul in our lives. The man who never accepted average, who always inspired so many, he was gone from our lives. We had only memories of the past and fear for the future. But we struggled on, and my mother was a cheerful soul and very positive. She had 3 boys under the age of 9, and she was 35 years old. And she was particularly good at looking after other people, whether it be her own children or people in the community. I always seem to remember on Sunday after church, we would find some little old lady with hairs growing out of little warts on her chin, who we never met before, and she smelt a bit, but we just didn't say anything about that. And she came and had lunch with us because she didn't have anywhere to go. So we met a whole range of different people who she invited to lunch, because that was what she did. And she went to hospitals to see people who were dying, and it was quite ironic that when she was finally dying, she was in the same hospital where she used to go and visit other people, and they were coming to visit her. But then I struggled on, and we struggled on as a family, and things were good, but we were very poor. In fact, to such an extent that at boarding school, where I was sent away to try and find other father figures, because obviously at home there was just my mother and my 2 brothers, they called me Stone Age Perks, because the clothes I had, they thought had come from the Stone Age. They were so old. They had all the elbows were worn out and things like that. And that taught me one motto, which is that happiness is not getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you already have. And it's made me appreciate things much more in my life since that moment. But then my day came to make my mark on the world. And I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps and be a leader, inspire other people, and go on operations around the world. But I decided I wasn't very coordinated. Guys, raise your hands if you're a pilot here. Yeah, okay, we've got a few pilots here. I realized I wasn't particularly coordinated, and also I got a bit seasick bobbing up and down in a ship, so I thought I'd go and join the British Army. So I went and spent the following 20 years in the Army, but I went to the world-famous Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, and it was a very special place where you met many interesting people. Lee and I got married 3 years ago, and our best man is Jamaican, who we met when we were together in the same platoon. There's Prince Talib, who's in Ras Al Khaimah, a major general in charge of the police force there, and he was in our company as well. And the King of Jordan was in our company as well. So there's some very interesting people from a whole range of backgrounds. And in October, we go do some charity work in Nepal, and one of the major generals who helped after the earthquake there was in the platoon as well. So a special group of people. And when I got to Sandhurst, I found I wasn't particularly good at this drill thing, where you have to march. I couldn't kind of get it right. So my sergeant major, as you see here, he would yell and scream at me. And he'd like to put his face very close, and he'd go, "Mr. Bowman-Perks, sir, what is your village doing for an idiot when you're here?" And called me the village idiot ever since that moment. But apart from being appalling at drill, I got into the swing of things. I really enjoyed it. And after Sandhurst, my life went from strength to strength. And then one day I got invited to go back to the Royal Military Academy. Each regiment sends their best officers to go back to be one of the leadership instructors. And I thought I was at the top of my game. And there I was with my dog, Dudley. But little did I know I was so wrong. There's a term psychologically that we call relative deprivation. That is, you compare yourself to other people, and you either think yourself good or you think yourself bad, but you're comparing yourself to others. And I was with the best of the best. So I thought I was good. I'd had a whole range of outstanding reports. But when I got there, my hopes, my aspirations, my future career was dashed on the harsh rocks of reality. Because my colonel said in my annual report, I was average. Average? I didn't do average. I aspired to be the best, to instruct and bring on these young officer cadets and be the best of the best. But I was just average. And I had a bit of a crisis. I thought, goodness, my career's over and I'm only about a third of the way through it. So in desperation, I cast my mind back to try and find other role models, people I could learn from so I could sort myself out and up my game to be better than just average. And I wanted to know about the father that I had never known. So I wrote to the Fleet Air Arm Officers Association. And I said, anybody who knew Commander Paul Perks, killed in Changi near Singapore, 1964, would they please write to his son, Captain Jonathan Bowman-Perks, who would love to know about the father he never knew. I got 30 letters from all over the world, really touching letters, funny letters, black humor, stories about my father. They were lovely, very touching, and I wrote to all of them. And those who lived near Sandhurst, near Sunningdale, those who live near Sandhurst, I invited to come to the officers' mess in this wonderful building behind you. Oak-paneled room with pictures of heroic officers leading others in battle and doing daring do and being very courageous all around the walls. And the retired naval officer pilots there told me amazing stories about my father. How he insisted as the commanding officer on test flying all the aeroplanes before his pilots, who were less experienced than he was, flew them. How that on the 6th aircraft that he was test flying, it developed an engine fault, a fire licked along the side of the aircraft, and he was in serious trouble. Just raise your hand if any of you have seen a very old now classic film with Tom Cruise in it called Top Gun. Yeah, a few of you. You may remember the part in it where Goose is tragically killed. Sadly, that was really what happened to my father. While traveling at about 600 miles an hour across the sea, skimming low near Singapore, the fire developed. His last words were, "I'm bringing it in," because he knew it needed to be checked out so the other pilots were safe and that fault wouldn't develop on their aircraft. He then banged out his navigator, Commander Bill White, who lived. That was the second time the poor chap had been ejected. And those pilots who ever have been in an ejector seat, it causes huge compression of the spine when you're sent at 200 miles an hour out of the aircraft. But in my father's case, the very seat that was supposed to save his life misfired and sent him into the tailpiece at 200 miles an hour, killing him instantly. And his body was washed up 2 days later near HMS Victorious, where he was the commanding officer of the squadron. Now, sitting opposite me was a pilot called Roger. And Roger said to me, "Jonathan, your father bought my ticket." So what do you mean? He said, "Your father died in my aeroplane. He should be here today having lunch with you, and I should be dead." And I asked him, I said, "How long have you been carrying that?" He said, 30 years. I said, "Well, look, as his son, I release you from any obligation." And I learned that day, that's what inspiring leaders do. They do take a risk for those they lead. They're prepared to go out on a limb to make sure that the ones they're in charge of are safe. To my left that day was the man my father saved, Commander Bill White. And Bill said, "Jonathan, to me it seems you have a choice. On the one hand, you can be a victim. Poor me. One of 3 boys to a 35-year-old mother, and you were very poor and you had no chance in life, and everything in life that then goes wrong for you is because your father was killed. Poor me. Victim, victim, victim." Or he said, on the other hand, you can choose to make your father your inspiring role model. You can go out into the world and look for inspired leaders, men and women who have those qualities that cause others to willingly follow them. Learn about it, study it, research it. Make it your calling, make it your vocation. He then told me a lovely quote. He said, Mark Twain once said, the two most important days in your life, the day you were born and the day you found out why. Bill showed me why. So the man you see standing before you in the shadow of his father is the man who followed Bill's advice. And I chose the route to make this my calling, my vocation, and to find men and women like you who want to be more inspiring, who want to inspirit us, bring out of others energy and life to give more. From that moment that Bill helped me understand what true north meant for me and how to follow it, I went from strength to strength. Life got better and better. And it wasn't without its mistakes, as you see this picture of me in a moment of agony, having realized I've made a really big blunder. And I've made lots of them. On this one occasion, I was lucky enough to become the aide de camp, the assistant, I think is the word for it, French word, to the general in charge of the British Army. He was called the Chief of the General Staff. Became a field marshal. He was a big shot. My predecessors, both like First World War officers, had very short life expectancy. They were supposed to last a year. Neither of them made the year out. Both got fired. And so I came into the job really quite scared about it and very anxious, because I'm not very good at being somebody else's servant, as my wife well knows. So I was going okay, and about 6 months had gone through, and this man who was ferocious, and everybody was scared of him. People, you'd see them quaking. Senior generals their legs were going before they were going into his office to see him. So I knew he was pretty scary, and I thought, is anybody ever scared of him? Or is he ever scared of anybody else? Well, apparently he was. He was once an ADC to a general. Let's call him General Desmond Gordon. And he said to me one day, looking rather anxious, if General Desmond rings and wants me to have lunch, clear the decks, I must go. He'll just, once in a while, he'll ring you up and he'll invite me to the club. And he explained where the club was. I must go. Okay. So anyway, a week went by and I got a phone call. Hello. Hello, sir. General Desmond here. Yes, sir. Lunch, the club, Thursday. For the general, sir. Hang on. Terribly sorry, sir. He's actually got a meeting with the Prime Minister. Oh. He said, well, how about you? You come and have lunch. Me, sir, just on my own. Oh, very good, sir. Thank you. The week went by. The day came. And I was busy doing lots of things for the general. And the next thing I remember was a very anxious colonel running into me going, Jonathan, where should you be? And I went, oh my goodness, I should be at lunch with General Desmond Gordon. And I'd forgotten. And do you get that feeling where you want the earth to swallow you? You just want to be somewhere else. And that cold trickle of sweat down your back. And you think, can I make up some story that a hurricane hit my house, or I had a cardiac arrest, or can't I just be somewhere else? Because the general's going to kill me when he knows. So I thought, right, I must ring and apologize. So I rang his home. I got his wife. I said, I'm terribly sorry. I said, must be honest here. I completely forgot to have lunch. Oh, my dear, you are in trouble. Oh no. So I wrote a long apologetic letter, and then I thought, I've got to go and face the boss. So I went into his big office. It was like sort of one of the usual hotel rooms here in Dubai, you know, small, goes on like this, tennis court, huge room. He's right at the far end. Yes, Jonathan, what is it? I said, oh, sir, I've got your business cards. Oh, good, good. So you've got to give him good news, And then I stood by his desk like a dumb waiter. I went, what is it? I said, sir, I've made a mistake. Well, it can't be that important. What did you do? Right, here it goes. I forgot to have lunch with General Desmond Gordon, sir. Oh my goodness! I mean, like, he lost colour. Oh, this is really quite serious. He said, you must ring him up. I rung him, sir. But write to him. I've written to him, sir. Just leave me alone. Go away. Go away. I hadn't been fired. It was just go away. So I kept low profile for about a week. Thought I'm going to make it. And then I get this phone call. Hello. Hello, sir. Lunch, the club, on Thursday. For the general, sir? No, just you. I won't forget, sir. I know. And you know what? I went, he was charming, and I learned so much. And one of my mottos in life is, when you've made a mistake, admit it. Early on, take action, apologize. But if I'd tried all sorts of cardiac arrest, hurricane hitting the building, I would have never got away with it. And I would have been another one of the casualties of the ADCs. So there's lots to learn from your mistakes as much as from your successes. So from that moment, seeing him with all the other generals, I thought, am I going to be a general like him? I thought, probably not. Do I want to be one like him? I thought, probably not. What do I really want to do? What is my calling? And as you know, it's about leadership. And so I wanted to get into leadership, and I wanted to go into business. So I did my MBA. And I went and studied all about that. And just before I left, as was kindly mentioned earlier, we had a big operation which I got involved in. And I went to meet a very nice old lady, which one of you might recognize, Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of England. And she very kindly presented me with my MBE for the work we did, working with the Australians, the French Canadians, the New Zealand Army and the American Army to prepare them for solving the East Timor massacre, which they did. I mention this not to big myself up, but for the reason that it was her presence that stays with me even now, many years later. That she had many people to meet, and she knighted various people and all sorts of different awards, and yet when she came to meet me, I had my 2 minutes. She had no FBI earpiece, she had no script to read from, she had no one whispering behind. She'd done her homework. And she began a conversation with me about the fact that I was leaving the British Army, I was going to go to PricewaterhouseCoopers to be a coach and a consultant. And she made me feel like I was the only person in the room that mattered. She had that way. And really the lesson for me, and I'd share it with you, is that when you're with someone, be with them. As my old Sergeant Major would say to me, sir, when you're in the room, be in the room. Don't be in the last meeting or the next meeting. Be with them. She was really in the room. She hadn't got her mobile phone. She wasn't tweeting like Donald. Yeah, she wasn't on Facebook. She was with me. And if you can be with people, it's incredibly powerful as a leader. So from that moment, I went into business. And I just want to tell you briefly about two business leaders and a group of business leaders and the kind of work that Lee and I do. The first one is Alison. Alison, a senior leader, female leader, very impressive, got involved in the Olympics, and then she was running this big property business. But she was down in the weeds. She admitted it herself before we started the coaching. She was in there helping everybody. Her diary was crammed. She had 4 meetings overloaded, laid over each other one. She thought that she was being rewarded for being super busy. When people asked her, how's it going? She goes, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I haven't slept. I've just worked all night. I'm so busy. As if it was a badge of honor. And she was just overwhelmed by it. Literally, the overload, the age of overload, she was suffering this big time. So in the books that we wrote, a couple here for a couple of you later on, in one of the little exercises we'll do at the end, she took away 3 tips from other leaders that really served her very well and made a huge difference. The first one was be on the balcony and not on the dance floor. She was doing big time moves on the dance floor. That was what she was good at. She knew that. But she realized that what got you here won't get you there. She was in a new role now, and she needed to be up on the balcony seeing the whole picture. That was a big thing she did. And by doing that, she cleared a lot of stuff out of her diary. We were discussing earlier that Peter Drucker, one of the great management thinkers, he said, the leaders like yourselves, it's often not doing more stuff, it's doing less stuff. It's learning to say no to certain things so that you can say yes to the things that matter and the people that matter, particularly your family and friends. They matter. Because if you don't let them know they matter, when you get home one day, they're not there anymore. So Alison took that. Balcony, not dance floor. Now there's times you need to go and visit the dance floor, and here in the group, as I've got to know people, Lee and I have discussed and had conversations with all sorts of people about what you do. You do need at times to go down as the leader and encourage the people who are working for you. Go and speak to them. One of the people I still remember, Alan Layton, who was a big supermarket CEO who went and took over the British Post Office. And in his first 2 weeks in the job, he said, clear the decks, I'm going to go and be a postman for week 1, and I'm going to be in the sorting office for week 2. Do you know what he found out? He found out, firstly, that people couldn't wear their boots. They couldn't wear their own boots. They had to wear issue post office boots, which were only 2 sizes. So they didn't bother wearing them, and they got disciplined for not wearing the boots. The second thing was their waterproof jacket, and you know what British weather is like. You know, I was 18 before I realized that a waterproof jacket wasn't a second skin. I just thought that's what you always wore because it rains all the time. And he got them Gore-Tex waterproof jackets so they could breathe in it and wouldn't get sweaty inside it, but they'd be dry. And the third thing they complained about, their letters and parcels were always soaking wet because the bag they carried them in wasn't waterproof. So they got them a waterproof bag. Sounds pretty simple. But that was the CEO going down to the ground, back to the floor again. And having had strike after strike, for 3 years they never had another strike. Just those simple things, because the leader went down and found out what it's like on the front line. The third group I want to mention is a group of senior leaders who get together. They all run their own businesses, they're in different organizations, and you can do this around the group. And they come together with me as the facilitator, or it could be Lee, it doesn't really matter. But we create a safe environment where the 6 of them share ideas on one of them brings a real live issue to the group. Very, very raw. Personal problem, personal vulnerability, whatever it is. And the others share their wisdom and experience. They don't tell him what to do or her what to do. They just share, when they've had a similar thing, what they did. And the leader who's got the issue can pluck out the best from it and then shares their decision, action, next step, called DANS. If you're in any meeting, if you do nothing from today, take away the word DANS. D-A-N-S. What's your decision? What's your action? And what is your next step? And they make that DANS, and then the others all appreciate one quality about them. They may have not met them before that day, but they appreciate one quality about them, which helps them think well. So that's a little bit about some of the work we do. Before I finish this part of the talk, we move on to the next bit. I just want to end with a final thought, that in the 37 years of leadership, from that time you saw me as the 18-year-old to my time now at 55, if I was to distill and consolidate all the learning that I've picked up into perhaps just one tip for you, it's this. What's your true north? Because until you find and follow your own true north, then you may be, as I was for many years, a little lost in the world. My father left a saying with my 2 brothers, which was passed on to me, and it was this. He said, don't die with your music still in you. Don't die with your music still in you. Pass it on, pay it forward to help other people. Thank you.